Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Free Minds to 3 Million, where we're going to talk about the journey we've had as free founders, starting a small business and getting to 3 million revenue in 2 years. So it's an inside story about a company that has raised £1 million in venture funding, hit 1 million revenue in year 1, 3 million in year 2, and at the same time changed hundreds of lives whilst disrupting what is traditionally a traditional sector. So who's it for? People interested in startups, in business, people who are founders, future founders, leaders, managers, investors, but also for anybody who likes a good startup story as well. So we'll share insights and the lessons we've learned on the way. So as an introduction, so I'm Jonathan Slater. I'm an entrepreneur. I graduated in nuclear engineering. I've started 2 businesses, but even back at university, I used to make and sell hair ties on eBay to pay for my nights out. Always been one to start a business.
I knew you'd ask me to go first. My name's Lorna Armitage. So my background is in both education and cybersecurity. So worked as a senior academic for a number of years alongside Andrea, but also for well over 20 years now as a cybersecurity consultant, sort of advising to both public and private sector, including government.
There's nothing left for me to say, really, is there? Apart from my name, it's not Lorna Armitage, it's Andrea Cullen. But otherwise, background really similar to Lorna's, both education, consultancy, and more recently, obviously, the last couple of years with CAPSLOCK.
Super. So we'll take you back to 2019, the 11th of September. This is the day we started the business together. We officially incorporated. Everything seemed normal. I think Boris Johnson was the Prime Minister.
We've had a few since then, haven't we?
Donald Trump was making friends with King Jong-un, and COVID was just around the corner as well. But other than that, perfect time to start a business. So we incorporated under the name of the Academy of Cybersecurity Limited. That would soon change. We incorporated with 9 original shareholders and directors. That would also change. And we also incorporated with 10,000 shares at £1 nominal value, not knowing it cost us £10,000 to pay up those shares. That was a mistake as well.
Yeah, and that changed as well pretty quickly.
And back then we also felt pretty young. But
we looked pretty young as well, didn't we? It's aged us.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been a right journey. So what did we decide to start in terms of a business? So we're going after some pretty big problems. Over the next decade, 5 million UK workers will need to reskill as the skills we need in the labour economy change. And at the same time, there's massive skills and diversity gaps within the technology sector. And alongside that, the access to opportunity, particularly careers change in education, it's not equal to everybody. So if you've had a different start in life, you might not be able to access a degree, for example.
Yeah, I think that was the case, and that was that opportunity really to give people an opportunity to reskill and turn them into cybersecurity professionals. But for us, the most important bit was to remove barriers, such as that upfront costs, and to actually increase that diversity. And we wanted to do that at scale, and we wanted to do it online. And it was very much a case of, we can do this, we can keep our integrity, we can give people opportunities, we can make sure it's all about equality. We can also make money while doing this. Those things can be done together. They can go hand in hand, and you can do it and maintain that integrity as you're doing it.
Yeah, and I think the majority of businesses nowadays, you've got to make a social impact. You've got to be conscious of the environment, etc., to be a successful startup now. I think it's really important to consumers and other businesses. And we decided to reskill people at scale as well, so we do it online, which is completely different to, back in 2019, that was a pretty novel idea.
It was, yeah, pre-COVID. Pre-COVID.
So we'll just give you some context of what we do as a business, and then we'll get into the interesting bits. So we deliver award-winning cybersecurity boot camps. We reskill adults to become cybersecurity professionals entirely online within 6 months and with no upfront costs. We remove barriers to access to education so that people from any background can join the future of work. So it's cohort-based education, 16-week course full-time or 26-week course part-time, delivered online at scale. So we've got one product, one curriculum, and there's no upfront cost for learners to enrol on this course either. So they repay a percentage of their future salary once they land a high-paying job. And then we also because of that business model, we'll wrap around world-class learner support services as well. So help them get into the industry, land a career, coaching and so on. So like the three main objectives there are can we do this online? Can we do it at scale, a venture scale? Can we do it with no upfront costs where we can innovate the current business model of how education works? And then can we wrap around support to achieve positive outcomes? So really focusing on the customer.
Yeah, I think the cherry on the top is making sure we've got a world-class product as well. Actually, the key to this was our integrity, as Lorna said, but equally the quality of what we were delivering. So it was super important, whatever we did, that we felt it was absolutely the top of its game.
So we'll talk about how to take an idea from paper in your heads to the point where you get investment, so pre-seed funding. So how did we get it off the ground? Well, we incorporated pretty badly, not a great start, but it's a definitive step, right? So you've got this idea. When you incorporate, there's a real quality of mind where there's a great book called Think and Grow Rich where the purpose, when you've made that decision, that's like the most important step. So it might be starting a business, it might be changing your career, it might be just doing something in your life, a better relationship, but that once you made that decision, it's so important. So then we put together a pitch deck and a basic financial model, and it really helps us with that idea process, right?
It was basic as well at that stage.
Yeah. And from that point, we enrolled an investment readiness program called UCLAN, and effectively after that we started pitching to investors remotely. So back in 2019 at COVID, there were no in-person pitching to dragons anymore. It's all done by Zoom, which it really takes the pressure off if you're a first-time founder, first-time pitcher. And at the same time, we also applied for Innovate UK grant funding. So this was 2020, the beginning of 2020, and these are the steps we took to get that idea and get it into a stage where it's investment ready.
Yeah, I think, it's important to say as well, we were all working full-time, other jobs as we were doing this at this stage, ready to take that step to give up the jobs and go full-time once we had that financial backing to do that. Probably leads nicely on,
Next slide. So this is our first ever pitch deck on the left here. So like terrible branding, we're called the Academy of Cybersecurity. And over that 9 months in 2020, we enrolled onto a startup accelerator, which, if you get the opportunity to go onto an accelerator, they're fantastic. They do a really good job for the startup ecosystem. They helped with like branding, getting the idea together, helping with a pitch deck, meeting people, networking. And we launched the website as well. So what we wanted to find out really quickly was, is this a product people want to buy? Are people going to enroll on this? And the business is going to be interested in what comes out the other side. So we created a website, a registration form. And at that point, we spent about £500 on Google Ads just to put it in front of people. And we saw, oh, wait a minute, people are clicking on this, they're registering, people are interested. And at that point, it's really important for investors as well, when you see that traction in a product, that it's got legs and you're not just working on something which is a dull idea, which isn't going to be venture scale. So demonstrable traction. And we continued in terms of feedback and iteration as well. So we spoke to anybody who would listen effectively. In the top there, that's Anthony Rose, the founder of Seed Legals. He's the father of the BBC iPlayer. We did a pitch deck clinic with him and he just ripped us to shreds. And that's on YouTube as well if you want to find it. It's very embarrassing. But in Q3, we also we were successful in grant funding. So this was Innovate UK, and it can be a tremendous source of initial seed investment for companies who might not be quite venture scale yet, but to get off the ground.
100%. I think if you've got anything that's innovative, it's definitely worth looking at those grant funds. 100%.
I think
I was going to say, just to be clear, grant funding, it tends to be if you get business finance, there's some cost to it. For grant funding, there's no actual cost. You'd expect to put some element of it towards that overall expenditure. I would say the one pain point out of it is the amount of paperwork that surrounds it. But if you're up for that grant funding, you don't pay it back. So it's a great source of finance if you can get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, if you're working on an idea where you want to get investment, doing all this stuff in terms of bootstrapping, where you're doing it without your funding first and you're proactive, trying to get it off the ground, is a really good signal to investors and people who might back you. Because if you wait until you get funding before you start anything, what happens if the business gets in trouble and you run out of cash? Then are you going to be there for the business anymore? Yeah. You want someone who's really proactive and can bootstrap. All right, so in September 2020, we got our first pre-seed term sheet from an institutional investor. We got offered 350 grand.
We were so excited.
It's a lot of money back then. And this was at a 1.35 million post-money valuation. So we thought the valuation was a little bit low, given like the idea and the traction we had. So we used something called a performance ratchet, where if we did well, the valuation had increased retrospectively. And it's a really good I guess a good term to have if you're not quite comfortable on the valuation, you can use something like a performance ratchet.
I think because when you're starting out, you're probably going to have to take a little bit of hit on your valuation, until you go forward. But if you can get something like a performance ratchet in, that is a good measure. If you exceed those expectations, then you are getting that reward back in terms of that investment.
Yeah. So what it gave us a 12-month runway to be able to pilot a cohort, test the product in the real world. So we all resigned at that time.
Yep.
I think
We all quit our jobs.
You were on pretty decent jobs at the time.
We had very good jobs, very good careers at that stage. We quit and went full time into CAPSLOCK. Yeah.
Yeah. And then as soon as we resigned from our full-time jobs, more COVID happened. Was
second
additional
lockdown hit just then.
Yeah, and that term sheet was redacted. So the investor literally said to us, like, no, it's the macroeconomic environment's not quite right. So we suddenly had a 4-month grant runway, no jobs, no income, and it was a bit panic station. So had to deliver on this Innovate UK project and still raise money as well. So it was a bit of a scramble at that time.
The credit cards took a bit of a bashing for those 4 months.
I think it's still in my overdraft now. But come to March 2021, and it all worked out. So we raised 350k in the end with 2 institutional investors and 10 angel investors. Very different type of people, different motives, but you can learn a lot from both types. We used a platform called Seed Legals. Fantastic platform if you haven't come across it. It's great for business governance and doing investment rounds, board meetings and so on. We recruited our founding employees at that time as well. And then we launched our first cohort in February 2021 and our second cohort in March 2021. We had 86 learners who trusted us, CAPSLOCK, to change their lives, to start a new career, which was super exciting for us, wasn't it? And we were proper learning on the go. Really.
Absolutely. It was fantastic. I remember that first cohort in February being sat thinking, is anybody going to turn up? Is anybody going to turn up? And all these people turned up and then thinking, do you think they'll come back tomorrow? And then they kept coming back and it's like, oh, this is working. I think on the founding employees, for me, that's really important, getting the right founding employees into the company who are going to support you there. We use share options for our founding employees. So, they are part of that business. They own part of that business. We're all working together for the same goal. And I think that can be really powerful and help you kind of build and maintain the culture that you want in the business. 100%.
And at that point we were doing pretty cool stuff. So we were doing staff away days. We went to the Crystal Maze and it was through the business expense, which was pretty cool. And we were doing like company stand-ups at the beginning of the day to get things off the ground. So like for this, from idea stage to pre-seed funding and launch, these are our sort of top tips in terms of what we thought really worked, and what we took away now is don't build your board too early. So when we incorporated, we had 9 people involved, and we've got 4 directors now. We've lost 5 of them on the way. And as you go, you very quickly outgrow certain people, or they don't add as much value as they used to do, and it's a completely natural part of business growth. So if you're starting a company, don't build that board too early. Try and get as far as you can before you bring people on board, because we're now at a position where we can attract much more qualified people with loads of experience, where back then wasn't quite the case because we're a startup. Get your governance right early. I think Laura and Andrea have been experienced business professionals, me not so much. This is really important. So like management accounts, you're doing your finances monthly. So as soon as you incorporate, you want this good governance, your board meetings and getting that together as well.
Yeah, making sure you've got process, something repeatable. In terms of adding value to the business, actually, it needs to be that anybody looking to invest or become part of the business needs to see what it is you're actually selling, what it is you've got. And part of that governance and structure is all about demonstrating you're an authentic business, actually, with the quality processes.
I think when you're in that startup mode, you've got to kind of do things on the fly. It is just natural. It's very quick. It's very agile. And a lot of the things throughout the business were in our 3 heads. And what we found is actually the quicker that you can get them out and on paper, and like Andrew said, build those processes, make sure that that's all there. As Jonathan said, that governance, then actually that is better, and it does make the business more valuable in the long term. It's very hard to do that stuff retrospectively.
Yeah. So when you talk to especially institutional investors and funds, if you don't have the right governance in place from early days, it's really difficult for them to do due diligence and trust the founding team.
Yeah.
So be milestone focused, articulate So you want to articulate the big idea, the grand vision in terms of, yeah, we could be a unicorn. We can, hit 100 million in revenue in 7 years. But you also want to be internally really sort of milestone focused. So, right, okay, how do we get 350 grand in the bank? How do we build the pitch deck? How do we launch the first cohort, get the digital campus together, etc. So really tiny incremental steps, which eventually takes you to bigger and bigger milestones.
Yeah. I think feel the fear and do it anyway is a really, really key thing, because it is scary. As we said, there was a point where we were pretty much all three unemployed, no income coming in, and no investment at that stage. And we could have given it up then and said, actually no, we're gonna have to go back into a role and stuff. But I think there was an element of, if we don't do this now, then we're never going to do it. We've got the idea, we know it can work, we genuinely believe in it. Yes, it's scary, but we're going to give it a go anyway. That's not easy, I don't underestimate that it is difficult. We were there, it is, but if you don't, you'll never know. So there's got to be an element of that feeling that fear and doing it.
I was just going to add to that, really. I feel a lot of fear. I think that's probably not on the list, but another good thing is to look at people who maybe have a different risk appetite to yourself. I think we all look at risk slightly differently. I'm the most risk averse by probably a country mile, but I think it is helpful to have both sides of that discussion, really.
Yeah. Startups are a very high risk environment anyway, so if you are risk averse, it can be difficult if you're not in the right team, but you've got to be ready for things not to work, for things to break, and just continue to learn and iterate. It's absolutely natural in the startup environment.
Yep.
I love this point. So get traction, sell your products, even if it's not 100% ready. If you've got an idea, create a website, learn WordPress, learn Webflow, get a CRM involved, and get it out there into market. Spend 500 quid on Google Ads, and make sure people want it before you invest your time and other people's resources into an idea. Build a diverse team with
it's absolutely essential is the diverse team. You need that differentiation of thought, that diversity of thought in the team. Otherwise, we're looking at building a business where we're wanting to remove barriers, and we're wanting to look at making it equitable for people and giving opportunities. Well, quite frankly, we're three white people stood here. If we haven't got a diverse team, we haven't got that diversity of thought around us, then it's very difficult to ensure that we're removing all barriers for all people. So that's really key. And I think the other thing as well for it is actually making sure you're clear on what kind of culture you want in your business, because you're going to be the ones setting it and you're going to be the ones maintaining that, and you need to bring people in who can get on board with that and maintain that. I think one of the things that outside of the product that we sell, but in terms of a team we do really well, is the culture in the business is absolutely fantastic. And we're a team of 21 now. 23 now, but I don't know, probably me and you, but we're managing to actually maintain that really positive culture throughout the business, and that is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I guess some juicy stories along the way to make it more interesting. So we did something called Vitali, and what we found, we were taking a lot of external calls with investors, suppliers, potential customers. But we noticed that all the conversation and all the questions were pointed towards me. Jonathan, hence the title. So we decided to do a tally in terms of those. We took 18 external meetings and we counted the amount of times people said our names in meetings. And what we found was my name was mentioned 117 times, Lorna's 16 and Andrea's 11. And we were three co-founders, all the same. But even questions about the curriculum, which you two are absolute experts on, were pointed towards me, and follow-up emails with Jonathan. So
it was quite interesting to watch him try and answer them, though.
This needs to be delegated. So we published these findings. We got into Sifted, a few other publications in terms of the misogyny, which is apparent, particular with investors. Investors are the worst. We spoke with one investor on Teams, and he was leant back in his chair and he just started scratching his balls, not even noting that he was on Teams.
Just horrendous, actually.
There was another man from a pretty big fund in the Northwest who was literally sat back in his chair with his feet up on the table alongside his female investor, and who was engaged in a much better conversation for us. I think as a mixed gender team, and even for me now, if you don't realise that you're being sort of might not be conscious, but being misogynistic and not making sure that you're talking to everybody in a meeting, it can be a real turn off if you're a business and you're looking for customers.
Yeah, and for us, actually, some of the decisions, even at times when we needed the investment, we actually turned those investors down because, again, we want to maintain that culture. We want to keep our integrity and what we're about. And it was like that's not. You're not aligned with us and what we want to achieve there, and again that was scary because we needed the money at that stage, but it just and in hindsight it was just the best decision all around because it would not have worked in terms of what we're about. And I think from mine and Andrea's perspective, it was very frustrating. Actually, because in terms of the experience in cyber, in curriculum, in education, that experience comes from us. Andrea is the most experienced person in that room and was very rarely addressed, which was bizarre. But also for Jonathan, he's really uncomfortable. He's sat there not able to answer certain questions and having to, actively say, oh, I think that's more appropriate to ask Andrea Lorna, and he would just bounce straight back to him. It's like, I don't know what to do. It's just...
Yeah, and we were discussing it, so we put it out on social media. One person even compared me to Jesus because I was in the middle of the three of us in a picture, but I've never lived that down. I still do think I'm Jesus.
It's his nickname now in the company. He actually, this person actually said that the reason they must have spoken to Jonathan more often was because we put a picture out where Jonathan was sat in the middle of us, and in art history and the Last Supper, that's where Jesus sat, which shows that he is, I don't know, the boss. Yeah. I mean, go figure that. I have no idea on that one, but
yeah. So we'll bring you up to speed in terms of what's happened in 2021. So we grew the team from 3 founders to 11 employees. The first cohorts were a tremendous success, so net promoter score of 87. 78% of our graduates were hired and placed into industry, and then we raised another 500k as well. So from the same investors, a couple of extra angels, we did what's called a bridge round. Then we won a couple of cyber innovation awards from the government and Tech UK, and then we launched another 2 cohorts off the back of that bridge round at $500,000 there, enrolling another 172 learners in the first year, which is more than any UK university in terms of their cybersecurity courses. So first year doing it at scale. So it was good, but it wasn't all plain sailing. So we parted ways with 2 advisors, 2 non-exec directors. We parted ways with, actually there was a 4th co-founder, but it was just a weird dynamic, wasn't it? We don't mention his name anymore. We had a ton of naysayers and gatekeepers, so people working in the industry saying, like, how can you reskill someone to work in cyber in 16 weeks? I had to go through 6 years of study to get where I am. There's no chance you can do that. And my God, have we proven them wrong. Our learners, the first cohort, they thought we were a scam, but there's very realistic chance that we were because we had nothing to prove. But we've got much better word of mouth and reputation now. The pressure, we were raising a bridge round with employees on the payroll, and that's what our cash runway looked like in that year. Like, you don't take your eyes off of that graph, because if you don't do anything in 6 to 7 months, you're effectively out of business, and you're like the other 80% of startups who fail. So really conscious of that. And then it was very long hours in the first year, to the point, no holiday, no annual leave. It was full in that. We're not promoting sort of hustle culture, but just for our business, it needed the 3 of us really sort of all hands on deck. And I think the majority of startups, that's what the reality is like. Yeah. No. So year 2. So we'll bring you up to speed in terms of where we are now. So we did what we did in year 1, but we just doubled it. So we did twice as much of everything. The team grew from 11 to 24, and we enrolled 350 learners. But the skills you need in the business at this point, they really start to change. So instead of that, let's say, hustle culture where you're learning and you try to do things as fast as possible, suddenly you get past £1 million in revenue, £1 million in EBITDA, and you really have to go through a process of maturity where you put your processes in place, you get your board meetings down, your employees have got policies to follow, which makes it easier to scale. Otherwise, it's really difficult to grow if you don't have that in place from this point onwards, really.
Yeah, I would say in some ways that's the bigger change than the initial startup phase, almost, because like you say, at first it's all quick decisions. There's small numbers of you can just make decisions on the fly and do what it is you feel is best. When you've got 20 some employees, you do have to have process and policy in place that you've got to follow. It's got to be fair, and it's got to be replicatable, and all those things that growing pains can be really, really really troublesome. So I think it is a big step change, as Jonathan says, moving from startup mode to that kind of building maturity.
Yeah. And at this point, when we got to around 20 employees, we started hiring people who were like C-level or board, well, not board level, but management level, really experienced individuals. And to the point where your skills as a founder, they're not needed as much. I was like really heavily involved in the admissions process, in the marketing, getting the word out there, and suddenly we've got a head of growth who does a lot of that now, and I'm not needed as much as possible. And again, that's a really natural part of business growth as you get to sort of like a Series A level 1 million EBITDA plus. And it can be difficult if, as a founder, if your role changes, you really got to come to terms with that. And I've been doing over the last sort of 4 months. To the point where that is the ultimate goal as founders. You want to make yourself redundant eventually. We didn't expect it in 2 years, but that is the goal for founders. You want to be able to exit at some point. You don't want to be running a business for the next 10, 12 years, unless you're a Mark Zuckerberg or a few. Yeah,
I think that was always our plan. We were very clear. Actually, this is a really important point, because at the very beginning, when we got together and we started the business together, we were very clear about what our objectives were, and that we were all on the same page with that. And the plan was always, we build the business, we step aside, we bring people in better than us to take over to run this business, and we were always very clear as well. We want an exit from this business in 3 to 5 years. That's why we did it, and we built it. We want an exit where somebody can take this and scale it even more than we can. But as Jonathan said, even though that was always our plan going forward, we'd always planned for that. As Jonathan started to move aside from the business, actually emotionally, that's really quite difficult for him and for us, because we'd been such a tight-knit team together for this time, and although it's a short amount of time, it is such an intense time that, you become very close, you work together. And I think for us, that was a real difficult change for us to manage. And then, so as you begin to grow, we were completely B2C in terms of our revenue, and everybody you speak to when you think about exit or when you talk to investors is B2B revenues are so important. So getting revenue from other businesses, and we were fortunate actually in 2020 we got a fantastic relationship with BT, one of the biggest organisations in the UK. With us, working with a startup was fantastic, loads to learn. But that B2B revenue really becomes a strategic objective as you grow, and at the same time you start to lose sense of what money is. You look in your bank account and you see ridiculous figures, and there's you look at your personal bank account, you're still in your overdraft. Yeah. It's to the point where you don't get out of bed for like something worth like 10 grand business wise. You do lose that sense a little bit as you get into the millions in revenue. Yeah. It is easy, but you kind of got to remain a little bit grounded and look at, I think Jonathan's point is on these graphs. Our eyes are always focused on this. What's our runway? We've got 20 people that we're responsible for now, for paying their salaries, for them paying their mortgages. We need to make sure that runway is constantly there. It's at a level where we can maintain that and make sure everybody's paid.
Yeah. So to wrap things up, what's the next step when you get to this point? So for us, there's going to be some sort of exit, right? We've had a lot of inbound interest, like private equity firms, from really large-scale VCs, from other, let's say, competitors asking, what's your M&A strategy? And at that point, you're kind of like, okay, what is private equity? What is M&A? You kind of have to learn as you go as a founder. But over 50% of transactions now in the UK, they involve private equity. And when you're in the startup accelerators or when you think about an exit, private equity, it's not discussed very much, but it's absolutely a viable opportunity for people to exit. So private equity will come in, they'll take a majority stake of your business, and they'll roll you out a bit. So they'll buy like half of you out, and then you'll continue to build for 2 or 3 years. So we're just learning about that at the moment. Some good conversations.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that was always the plan for us. But again, for us, it's maintaining that culture, maintaining that integrity, what we're about, So working with the right people, having the right conversations. Absolutely, we want to exit, but it's to the right people who can continue the culture and what CAPSLOCK has built and scale that to a level that probably the three of us maybe we could do, but we would probably nearly kill ourselves doing it, quite frankly. And some additional support on that. And I think private equity is a good option, as Jonathan said, because they will support you in doing that, but you will still stay in the business, and then you get a second opportunity to exit then as the business is built further. So for us, that's where we are at the moment as co-founders, looking at those options that are on the table.
And I think, I never understood why large businesses are so, they'll put a hiring freeze on, or they won't do things at the financial year end. And it's because you're so focused on EBITDA, sort of your bottom line profit at that point, in terms of, all right, well, every £100 we spend now is going to be £10,000, £20,000 off a valuation. So you're really focused on EBITDA instead of, in the early days, you're focused on revenue, on growth, on that top line. That suddenly changes as you start thinking about exit.
Yeah.
You also learn what an investment banker actually does. Never knew before, but they buy and sell businesses. They're like recruitment consultants, but for businesses, which is pretty cool. So we're just going through a process now. We're being prepped where they'll go through all parts of the business and get us ready for some sort of transaction, be it private equity or an exit.
Yeah.
And that's where we are today, really.
Yeah.
So end of talk, I think.
Well, I think just on a personal note, maybe just the sort of biggest learning curves. I think for me, I'd worked in large businesses. The business side of it wasn't particularly a surprise, and dealing with people and leadership and all of that. I think for me, the biggest surprise for me was the emotional roller coaster that you go on as a co-founder and starting a business. It's up and down so much. It's like, so hectic and high and fantastic, and then, oh my god, this has happened, we need to deal with that, and it is just an emotional roller coaster. And I don't think I was mentally prepared for that, but I wouldn't change a thing. It's been such a fantastic journey so far, and I think the impact that we've had on people and our learners that are coming through, and the hundreds of learners, the lives that we've changed, just shows to me that you can have something that's profitable, because we all need to pay our bills, right? And we all want to have a nice life, but you can maintain that integrity and do something that's positive for society as well. That's mine.
Are we all doing one of these? Okay, mine then. I guess I always knew communication was king. I think no matter which relationship you're in, whether it's working with co-workers or customers, I think as a founding team that communication is absolutely 100% critical. Making sure that actually, whether you're going through ups and downs, you keep those channels of communication open, that you're honest, and that you actually support each other, whatever that looks like. I think the one thing I didn't expect, actually, was how much pleasure you can get from the lives changed. As was kind of said, the whole business was around removing barriers and helping people transition into cyber careers. That can be the most rewarding thing. And for me, I wasn't prepared for how amazing it was to have a hand in doing that.
And yeah, I think for me, it's been the most, the craziest personal development journey. Being a founder and getting to the business to this stage, let's say Series A, Series B, is you just learn so much about every aspect of running a business, about being a leader, about being a manager, about financial forecasting, corporate finance, exiting. It's just
so many.
If you have the opportunity to do it, wow, yeah, great stuff. So yeah, thank you all for listening to our story.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.